'Tis the season. Football coaches from the NFL and colleges getting fired as we reach the winter solstice. Hi, everyone. This is Will O'Toole welcoming you to another edition of Park Ridge Sports History. And I'll tell you, just recently I did a cartoon for one of the sites that I contribute work, the Sports Daily and Barn Burner, in addition to my own website. Although this time I haven't posted it just yet. Anyway, it got me to thinking about NFL coaches who get axed during the season. We've already seen two in the NFL this year. Bill O'Brien down in Houston, and now just recently Matt Patricia with the Detroit Lions. And the shame of it is, as I was speaking last week, post Happy Thanksgiving and a pre Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and Happy Hanukkah. Anyway, while I was doing the cartoon, it really dawned on me, and I thought about this, and this is where I'm going to go with today's story. And if I go off on tangents, remember, it's like us sitting at a bar and just talking sports between our hamburgers, our mug of beer, and of course, coffee and dessert. Anyway, it got me to thinking about coaches who were fired during the season and then how their replacement boats. In the NFL, it's really interesting. I counted it up, and of course, I could be off by one or two, but in the entire history of the NFL, and this is also including the AFL, they've had 106 firings of NFL coaches. This I know for a fact. Only one of them that year who replaced a coach during the season goes on to win a championship. I'm going to leave that little nugget of information, that little bit of trivia, for a little bit later on in the broadcast, because I'd love to go into this, because why I was thinking this, many times in baseball, in hockey and basketball, I've seen, or we have seen, where a coach has been replaced and the replacement coach does far better. I mean, in basketball, it's happened a number of times. One I remember that was right off the top of my head when I thought of poor Matt Patricia getting axed right after that terrible performance by the Lions on the Thanksgiving Day. And even a buddy of mine said they should never allow the Lions to play on Thanksgiving again, not until they get a better team, a more competitive team. And for the Lions, they haven't won since 1957, a championship of any time. Even winning divisions, I don't know if I really consider winning a NFC Central title all that special, but I guess when you've gone quite a bit, avoid between championships, I guess you'll get whatever you can and claim it as a championship. Anyway, I was looking, and as I stated, it's happened quite favorably in the NBA. I'm not saying it works all the time, and I do have the numbers for the NFL to show you what happens, but Magic Johnson, of course, helped to get rid of Paul Westphal. And then they hire Pat Riley. And you know how successful the Lakers were under Riley. And there was just probably your elite player, Hall of Fame player, just having personality conflicts with the head coach. And LA, to their credit, stepped right in, probably listened to their player, got rid of the head coach. And of course, it's history after that, because Riley and the Lakers win a number of world championships once Riley ascends to the head coaching duties for the Los Angeles Lakers. In baseball, I don't mean how many times we have seen this. The Yankees are a wonderful example. Back in '78, they get rid of Billy Martin, and don't get me on the number of times Martin was fired or what number he was fired here by George Steinbrenner. But let's just say, I think it was the second or third time. But Martin is fired. Uh, and Bob Lemon assumes the reins of the Yankees in that great 1978 season of theirs. 14 games behind the Red Sox in July, and they wind up not just overcoming those seemingly insurmountable odds, but actually taking the lead on the Red Sox late in the year. And if it wasn't for the Red Sox having a late game winning, a late season winning streak, we may never have had that October 2nd, 1978. And of course, Bucky Dent's, glorious home run in the annals of baseball history coming to fruition for him and the Yankees. And of course, then the Yankees steamrolled both Kansas City and the Dodgers to win their second consecutive World Series during the 70s for George Steinbrenner and the Bronx Bombers. So there was a case. They made a move, got rid of one. And of course, there were many locker room issues while they got rid of Morton there. And of course, Lemon probably brought obviously a different, just a different atmosphere to the locker room for the Yankees. Basically let the players alone just go out and play. And they did, and overwhelmed the Red Sox over it was a torrid surge by the Yankees over the last 6-7 weeks of the season. I'm just trying to think of hockey, nothing where, and I'm sure that my hockey fans out there will just know it right away, but there have been, even in hockey, one or two occasions where a coach has replaced another coach during the season and gone on to win the NHL Stanley Cup or gotten into postseason. And that's the other thing I was going to bring up. Only one guy has ever been brought in to coach a team in, let's say, during the season and gone on to the playoffs in NFL or AFL history. And of course, still keeping that a secret here. It's a little bit fun, a little bit of a cliffhanger. But I was just thinking basketball real quick. Seattle goes to the championship when they hire Lenny Wilkins as their coach. And they don't win it that year that he's hired, but they win it the following year. Bob Hopkins, of course, was replaced. I think Seattle was 5-22 at the time. They go on. They lose to Washington in the 77-78 championship, but then get back and win in 78 and 79 to win their first and only championship in Seattle. Of course, now they're in Oklahoma City. But let's take this back to football. And there's probably a number of reasons why in the NFL in particular, it's so hard to win as a midseason replacement coach. And I think a number of things. Most of the teams that are replaced or are replacement coaches or higher, they're just in a terrible rut. The franchise is in a terrible situation. The team is in a slump. And there's really not much you can do as that season progresses. But the interesting thing is, when I was doing the study, and of course I have to thank footballreference.com for the information. They made this so much easier for me to amass. Now, I will tell you this. There may be one or two of you who are willing to undergo to try to do all the research I did, and maybe you can do it quicker and easier and more efficiently than I have. But if I'm off by a percentage point or a win or a loss or a tie, okay, God love you, but go at it. All right. I spent quite a bit and it was fun doing it. I love doing the research because when I do it, I learn so much. But as I said, this is something with my cartoons. They start to make me think, and I say, gee, when was the last time this happened? Well, it always seems like the Lions seem to be one of those teams that gets rid of coaches in midseason. And when I did the statistical study of it, and I have to use my glasses for this, prior to this, of course, Detroit was known as the Portsmouth Spartans. And interestingly, they moved to Detroit, but don't stay or keep the moniker Spartans, which would have been kind of cool, I guess, because you have Michigan State there, also known by that nickname. But they changed their name to the Lions. They actually, prior to 1960, and I'm going to leave that as kind of a launching point for this. And the reason I originally did my study just until 1960 was that prior to that, it was just basically NFL teams, about 8 or 9 of them, and the old AAFC league that had Baltimore, Cleveland Browns, the original Cleveland Browns under Otto Graham, Otto. He's not a car, and the Baltimore Colts, and of course they become part of the NFL. Late 50s, early 60s. I thought 60 because I am 60, and that was just a natural bridge for me. Plus, you have the AFL coming into being in the 60s. The funny thing is, as I really got into this, I do go all the way back to the 1920s. And the interesting thing is, I don't know whether you had known this when Matt Patricia was fired, but interestingly, the Bears, one of the oldest franchises, if not the oldest technically franchise in the NFL, has never, and they are the only franchise to do this, they're the only franchise that has never fired a coach during the season. And of course, one of the reasons, George Halas. But I also think that probably they are aware of it and really say to themselves, look, let's just give our guys the benefit of the doubt, let them see the season through. And probably they do have their metrics. Guys are saying, guys, it really doesn't make any difference at all. In some cases, our progress is probably set back, retarded in some ways, that we can't move forward. So with firing a coach, it really doesn't matter. And I think the Bears really recognize that. Plus, you have Halas and you have Mike Ditka. I couldn't believe when I was doing the study how long Ditka was really in Chicago. And I am sure there were a couple of years there, but maybe the Bears front office may have said, maybe it's time to go and move on with somebody else because Ditka is keeping us back a little bit. But probably their sense of loyalty to Ditka is one of the quintessential Bears of all time, along with Gale Sayers. Dick Buck has probably kept him as the head coach of the Monsters of the Midway. But the Bears have never done it. Detroit, interestingly enough, has done it, and they actually have already hired and fired in midseason more coaches in the 21st century in 20 years than they did in the 20th century, in the 21st century, than they did in the 20th century. It took them 46 years to fire 3 coaches. It has only taken them 20 years to fire 3 coaches in the 21st century. And again, I really believe this. I think there is more pressure with TV and with media and with the social media, just so focused on the games. And let's face it, all the betting in the fantasy leagues, there is more pressure on these teams to win today. And that goes to say this: when you're only playing 16 games, and like baseball, that really represents 10 games, and you're practicing more than you're playing, I think what probably happens with many of these teams, they're beaten down. And probably, and I've never been in an NFL practice, and I know these guys are professional, but I am sure there is a psychological breakdown and more than likely a loss of motivation or just enthusiasm, almost, so to speak, going through the motions. I'm not accusing the players of going through the motions on the field, but there is a sense of loss. And I don't think you can get a change of culture in 3 or 4 games, as you can, let's say, over a stretch in baseball of 40 games, or in basketball, where those 4 games, or each game actually represents 5 games in basketball, right? Because they play an 82 game schedule. So 16 times 5, 80. So if you cut your losses with the one coach and fire him at the All-Star break, let's say in the NBA, you basically have 30, 35 games in which to really have the players embrace your philosophy. Maybe you design more plays, really get to know the personnel, be able to make little situation substitutions during games, really getting to know the personnel. Baseball, it really does lend itself. If you get fired at the All-Star break, or basically like Bob Lemon replaces him July 24th, Billy Martin in 1970, he had 70 games to work with. So I think baseball, the amount of games really helps major league managers really inculcate themselves with the players, and the players really adopt and accept, let's say, that manager's philosophy. One of the interesting things I saw, well, I'll give you this, with coaches being fired. And again, this is official, unofficial, but really unofficial, because I'm not an accountant. And anybody who wants to do the numbers for me, again, I'll take volunteers. I'll do the research. You guys can compile the numbers. I'm not the mathematician that my brother Jim is. Certainly an unbelievable case for numbers. But I was doing, now this is the record, all-time record of coaches who were fired during the season. Ready for this? There are actually 243, 655 with 9 ties. So they won 243 games in the season that they got fired, compiled. They lost 655. So you're talking about, let's just say, halfway into the season. And remember this too. The other thing I had to contend with way back when, there were some teams that weren't even playing 12 games, let alone 14 or the present 16. I think the NFL went to 16 about 1978, 79. So when I'm talking about, let's say, 8 games, you're talking about over, in most cases, 2/3 of the season. Maybe the replacement head coach gets 2 or 3 chances to win a few games. Anyway, 243. Actually, wait a minute. I did one other thing. There are actually 252, 664, and 9 for a winning percentage, 275. That's not even a Hall of Fame batting average for many of the great players. The replacement, now mind you this, they have fewer games to really show their talents to the front office, but they actually do better. So I have to, it's a caveat. Yes, maybe the Lions, like any of the other coaches who are fired during the season, maybe the replacement coaches win a few more games, but it's not at record-breaking numbers, believe me. The replacement head coaches during season, ready for this? This will get you. They are 261 and 492. 261, excuse me, and 493. All right, because I added one thing wrong. 261, 493 with 6 ties overall. But get this, yes, they do win at a higher percentage, but they're at 346. Guys, that ain't getting you anywhere to the playoffs, except if you're in the NFC East this year. That may get you to the playoffs, and who knows what happens in the postseason. You just may be popping champagne come February. But for the most part, I can almost guarantee you that you are not going to the playoffs with a 346 winning percentage, and that's what the replacement coaches have amassed over their lifetime. And the interesting thing is, ready for this? There have been only 2 coaches. Actually, I can say 2 coaches, because the third one that I'm saving, there are only 2 head coaches that go on to lead their teams to a Super Bowl, but not obviously in the year that they become the franchise's head coach. Actually, the retention level, this is the other interesting thing. Everybody thinks that, this may be my moment to really show the front office. No. Statistically, under 20%. Actually, the number is about 19.7% or maybe 19.1% of all mid-season coaching changes stay with the team the following year as the head coach. As the head coach. It's incredible. And I think it's this. The franchise, yes, they're having a horrible season. 1-7, 2-9, 0-10. They replace that head coach with one of the staff members. Well, what do? Probably 80% of the time, as the statistics are showing, they get rid of everybody and they start over. Maybe it's a good idea. Maybe it's a bad idea. More than likely, it's probably a good idea in this respect. If your replacement coach is coming from the staff that you have, and only 2 are retained in the history of the game the following year, and those 2 lead you to a Super Bowl, and I got news for you. Both of those guys were lost the Super Bowl. It doesn't bode well for you as a replacement head coach to become the head coach for that franchise. Basically, buddy, you're going to be looking somewhere else. Now, there is an exception to that where a guy kind of stayed on for a long time. Jason Garrett was a replacement coach back. I think he replaces Wade Phillips with the Cowboys. Let me just say, if you don't think I've done stats, I have pages of stats just for this. All right. Not looking for a gold medal here. It's just that it is an intense type of thing. It's really a labor of love. And but I get quite a bit of trivia, quite a bit of knowledge from doing for sports history, and I really do learn about quite a bit about the game. And you do learn quite a bit about the franchises as well. Let me just get Dallas here as I apologize to you. I know where I put them. By the way, it was Mike Lucci, not Joe Schmidt. I have to make an amendment. I made an error in last week saying I meant to tell you that. Mike Lucci was the middle linebacker. I think I said Joe Schmidt. Schmidt was the head coach for a while with the Lions. I think he was the head coach back in 1970 when the Lions finished 10-4 and make the wild card and lose, of course, to the Cowboys 5-0 as the Cowboys went to their first NFL or Super Bowl appearance and then losing that crazy game to the Baltimore Colts. I have one more page here. I know I have it. Please. I apologize. I know I have it here somewhere. I got the Arizona Cardinals. I got stuff I wanted to talk about them. Oh, here it is. Yeah. They were underneath, ironically, Detroit, who I've been talking about. Dallas has only done it once. And, of course, everybody realizes they were one of the easy ones to do. Actually, they broke from tradition because remember all the years that Tom Landry was there. And even when Jerry Jones replaced Jimmy Johnson with Barry Switzer, that was done during the off season. And, of course, Johnson and Jones had enough of each other and then move on. For the Cowboys, they are switching after the season. Of course, Switzer does lead them to a Super Bowl championship. But the Cowboys, yes, Jason Garrett actually finished with a winning record in 2010. He doesn't get them to the playoffs. They only finished 6-10. But really, the Cowboys, you can actually argue that they did get the benefit. They did give Garrett the benefit of the doubt. He does lead them to a couple of postseason appearances, but he replaced Wade Phillips. The interesting, and this is why I wanted to bring up Wade Phillips. Wade Phillips is replaced. Wade Phillips replaces other coaches, and Wade Phillips replaced even his father, Bum Phillips, with the Houston Oilers. In fact, I think, or the New Orleans Saints, I do believe. But father was replaced by son. I do believe in one of these moves. Yes, nope. Well, Wade Phillips replaced Dan Reeves with the Atlanta Falcons. And of course, interestingly enough, there's a handful of coaches. Maybe I don't have it here. But the interesting thing is there's a handful of coaches that not only did the replacing of a head coach during midseason, but when they were given the reins of another franchise, they found them getting replaced. I'm thinking Marion Campbell with Philadelphia and Atlanta. As I said, I'm thinking of Wade Phillips, who was replaced. Yes, Wade Phillips was replaced and did replace back in 2013. Gary Kubiak was the head coach of the Texans, and he gets replaced by Wade Phillips. And of course, Kubiak is 2-11 at the time. Phillips finishes 0-3. That gives him a record of 2-14. No, I'm sorry, probably 0-5. Phillips finished, so that's 2-14. He finished 0-3. I was looking for that one. Jack Pardee, who remembers him? Middle linebacker for the old Over the Hill gang with George Allen and the Redskins. He was replaced and did replace. Actually, Jack Pardee was replaced by a future Super Bowl coach. Actually, it's 3 now that I think about it. I apologize, guys. It's 3 different occasions coaches are replaced by future coaches who lead them to the Hall of Fame. Jeff Fisher replaced Jack Pardee. Pardee was 1-9 with the 94 Houston Oilers. And I think this is probably why I messed up. Jeff Fisher takes over and promptly loses 5 of 6, but he's retained and eventually leads that Houston Oilers franchise, who were then become the Tennessee Titans. Remember, they're stopped at the 2-yard line by the St. Louis Rams in the Super Bowl. And Fisher does lead them, doesn't win, but he does become the third coach who does take over in a midseason, is retained as the franchise's head coach, and does lead that same franchise to a Super Bowl. And in all 3 instances, they lose. He is also replaced later on when he becomes the coach of the Rams. In 2016, he's replaced by John Fossil, not Jim. And of course, Jim, the father of, does lead the Giants. And they're another story too, guys. The Giants were another team that never, ever remove the guy. They only did it on 3 instances. And actually, I have to, there's a caveat here as well. I said that they didn't win the championship. Well, they don't. Well, in 2017, Ben McAdoo is replaced by Spagnuolo. He goes 1-3, but isn't retained. The only other time it happened to the Giants in the last, let's say, 50 years, Bill Arnsberger, who was the architect of the 53 defense with Miami back in their heyday, the undefeated team, and then the back-to-back Super Bowl winners. And actually, they made it a trifecta, appearing in 3 or 4 Super Bowls. Oh, no, 3 in a row, excuse me. But the Arnsberger is 0-7 and is replaced in 76 by John McVay, whose son, of course, is now a coach. He finished 3-4 and does get the job. The Giants liked the job he did. Unfortunately, he was never able to get the Giants to the next level with the playoffs. And I think McVay eventually was replaced by Ray Perkins, if I'm pretty sure about that. And of course, it's Perkins who gets the Giants to their first playoff in about 18 years, in I want to say about 1980-81. I think it's season of 80-81. And of course, they lose to the Eagles, I believe, in first or second round. Anyway, back in 1930, a guy by the name of Roy Andrews, and I am sure my Giants fans out there who live and die with Giant history and trivia, hats off to you, because I'm just a newbie to Giant, let's say, all things New York Giants trivia. But There was a fellow by the name of Roy Andrews who had the Giants at 11-4 in 1930. He's replaced by a combination of Steve Owen and Coach Friedman, and they finished the season unbeaten 2-0. Owen does become the head coach and leads the Giants to a number of championships appearance and titles. But I found out why Andrews was not so much fired but replaced. He had been very sick and actually passes away, I believe, the following year or within 6 to 8 months of being replaced as the Giant coach. Interestingly, the Giants don't win the championship that year, 1930. They finish second. And why I say that, they actually play 18 games, but they finish with a lower winning percentage than I think. I'm going to say it's either the Packers or the Bears that win the championship. But interestingly enough, the Giants, with 14 wins that year, don't win the championship. So that's another reason why I kind of kept this from 1960. There's a little bit more, back in the early days, they were doing kind of what college football is doing this year, and that is, hey, are you guys available to play Saturday? Yeah, we are. All right, let's see if we can get a game. So much the same way in the early NFL. And of course, they were limited by transportation, etc. But the Giants do it technically only 3 times. But for the Giants, replacing Andrews with basically Steve Owen, not Owens, but Steve Owen, transforms that franchise. And they become quite a player in the NFL with the Packers and the Bears. In the 30s, the 40s, and even the 50s. Even the Giants' early 60s, late 50s, early 60s, were competitive. They were in championship games. It was really just that string, probably about from 64, obviously, to 80, where the Giants, kind of like the Yankees, were just always going home and never even really being a player. The only year I do recall the Giants having a shot at the playoffs was 1970, and they and the Cowboys were both 9-4. And I believe that if the Giants and the Cowboys won on the last day of the season, I think the Giants would have qualified and not the Cowboys. Tough to say, the Cowboys go out and they win and finish 10-4, and the Giants get hammered by the LA Rams. I remember that because I remember listening to it on the radio, and they lost 30-3. Interestingly enough, years later, I got to referee with one of those Giants, and he always talks about had they had video replay, or video cameras working the games like they do today to challenge a play. There was an early season loss to the New Orleans Saints where the Giants were ruled to have an incomplete pass. And I think it was Homer Jones who made the catch. And the catch was ruled incomplete, but they showed it later on. Apparently he was in bounds and had caught the ball. It was one of those diving catches in the mud in New Orleans. And the Giants wound up losing the game. And who knows how different it would have been. But I remember him talking to me about that. Anyway, last guy, Philadelphia has done it numerous times. Numerous times. And in fact, actually, the interesting thing I found out was that 1996, I'll come back to Philly in a second because I wanted to make this point. This guy probably amasses the best record and is retained by the team, and that's Cincinnati and the Bengals. And it's Bruce Coslett, who is a Bill Walsh disciple. Man, that was an unbelievable team, the Cleveland Browns, or the coaching staff that Paul Brown amassed. He had Walsh, he had Coslett, he had Sam Weish. These are guys who all were pretty successful as head coaches. With the exception of Walsh, the other two couldn't get their team. And as you start to realize, that a coach is a coach, but a head coach is a little bit different. You really do start to realize that. And maybe they're not designing the X's and O's, but there is just something about great head coaches. It's their charisma. It is their will. There is their philosophy. There's just something about them that gets teams over the top that maybe other coaches who are just unbelievable in the roles that they have, offense coordinator, defense coordinator. We've seen it time and time again. Steve Spagnuolo, guys like Dick LeBeau, guys like Bruce Coslett, guys who are, or Norv Turner. These are guys, Norm Chow. These are guys who, man, they made such an impression as assistant coaches because of their genius in designing plays or masterminding strategies for each and every game. And yet they're semi-successful as a coach, or if they are, they just can't get that team over the hump and onto a championship. Well, I kind of regard Bruce Coslett this way. I think that he probably was an unbelievable assistant coach. Yes, he replaces David Shula, Don's son, who was in 1996 was 1-6, and he finishes the season for the Bengals. They finish on fire. They win 7 of their last 9 games and just finish out of the line. Actually, they are one of the few teams that when I was doing this actually finish at 500 or above. And Coslett goes on. I don't think the Bengals really ever catch fire again. Like they did at the end of 96 with Coslett. I do think he gets them to a couple of playoffs, but nothing really happens for him. Actually, Bruce Coslett, the funny thing is, by 2000, he is replaced after he starts out 0-3, and he's actually replaced by Dick LeBeau, who finishes the season 4-9. And, you could even argue this, that the guys who are fired during the season, that the guys who replace them, no matter how much they can put in or maybe change certain things or readapt certain plays, really, it's really a true indication that probably the team either has to be scrapped, totally changed, or there has to be a total recommitment to something, because really what we do learn from mid-season coaching changes is that the franchise is really in disrepair, because even the 3 guys, well, with the exception of the one you could actually argue, and I'll give you that, Marv Levy, when he does replace Hugh Bullock, who, in fact, in this whole story of things, Hugh Bullock replaced and was fired, and then was hired and then replaced a number of times with with a few other franchises. But when Marv Levy really comes in with Buffalo, probably what he recognized was he probably does start to tinker. Now, with Buffalo that year, when Marv Levy comes over, he really can't change per se the culture. He does finish 2-5, but he probably did enough, or probably what helped him quite a bit was he said probably to the general manager and the Buffalo front office and the owners there, look, we have a good team here. What we need is a little stability. Give me a year and let me see what I can do. And of course, he leads them to 4 straight championships in the AFC and then 4 Super Bowls. Unfortunately, I always tell you, if Norwood hits that field goal against the Giants, history changes, because Buffalo probably does get over the hump and win 4 straight Super Bowls. And you are talking about them as Lake Erie, not just Lake Erie's team, but America's team part 2, because they had that kind of success. I am running out of a little time, so I want to get to the guy and the interesting thing with him. First of all, Raymond Berry, I had to get this. SMU graduate, one of the great wide receivers of all time back in the 50s. All right. The guy I'm talking about is a guy by the name of Wally Lem. And Wally Lem This was interesting, and I hope I have a few minutes here. Wally Lem, interestingly enough, he succeeds a guy by the name of Lou Rimkus. Unfamiliar with him. He starts out the season 1-3-1, Rimkus. This is after the Oilers had won the 1960 championship. And his previous coach, John Breed, who was Wally Lem's coach in college. Also, Lem was his assistant coach in a number of stops between college and the pros, et cetera, et cetera. He reaches out to Lem to become his coach. Well, Lem does the most terrific job of any replacement coach, bar none. He's the only one to go undefeated. He finishes 9-0. Not only that, but he takes Houston, the Oilers, to the championship, and they defeat the San Diego Chargers 10-3. Okay? And he's the only coach to do that in the 100 and some odd changes. The interesting thing is, how do you not retain this guy? Because Wally Lem had a little Lou Saban in him. After the year, he didn't want to stay in Houston. He was from the Illinois area, and he takes a job with the St. Louis Cardinals. And these are some of the plays. This is kind of cool. I found this when I was looking for pictures, and these are Topps cards. And these are St. Louis versus Pittsburgh, St. Louis versus the Steelers. And another one up here was St. Louis versus Washington Redskins. These are plays that I guess they were allowed to use and placed on Topps cards. And the reason why I want to bring that up, I apologize. There is a couple other guys that are undefeated when they replace a coach and they finish 1-0. But the greatest, my favorite, is Larry Wilson. Never realized he made the cover. And interestingly enough, this is a cover, and I think Wally Lem might have been the head coach of the St. Louis Cardinals when he was doing this. But Wally Lem and the old Houston Oiler logo. But Wally Lem, the only coach, midseason replacement, to win a championship in that year. This is Will O'Toole for Park Ridge Sports History, thanking you again for allowing me to come into your homes. See you next week with another story.